It was the biggest of the big blocks, the fastest of the pickups, and a car so legendary it could only be driven by Tom Cruise and Vin Diesel. The Chevrolet Chevelle. When Ford launched their Fairlane in the early 1960s, all GM had was the Nova and the Corvair, and those did not exactly inspire sales success. So in order to make up the gap, they decided to go back to basics with a smaller, simpler version that had lots of combinations. They called it the Chevelle. It could be a two-door, a four-door, a convertible, an estate, and even a ute pickup version. It was so popular that GM sold over 300,000 of these things in the first year. But we only want to talk about the most famous one. The louder, nastier, two-door coupe called the SS. You see, Pontiac changed America forever with the GTO as the first true muscle car. And initially, Chevy responded with a slightly improved Chevelle called the SS. The first year it was basically a trim package. It had an optional 283 cubic inch V8, making a whopping 220 horsepower. But that was just buying time for the next year when they launched the full 350 horsepower 327 V8. And the year after that, the SS 396 came out with 375 horsepower. And if that wasn't enough, you could go for the ultra-rare, ultra-exclusive SS 396 Z16. Only 200 of these were made for, and I'm quoting them, racing only, although they were still technically road legal. They were lightened, hardcore SS 396s, which, well, yes, some of them genuinely had a 396 engine. Others reportedly got the 425 horsepower L78 V8 out of the Corvette. Only about 75 of these things are known to exist today. Basically, long story short, the Chevelle SS became an absolute icon overnight. The GTO was great, but the Chevelle was arguably better, and it looked fantastic. Now, you would think that a very fast muscle car like that would go racing, and you're sort of right. You see, GM didn't have a factory team because they believed that by not racing they would stem off a antitrust effort by the other companies and the government. But that didn't stop some privateers from racing them, and one of those privateers was genius mechanic slash bomber pilot slash motorcycle racer Smokey Yunick. Alright, time out. Yep, sorry for the interruption. Thank you for leaving the comments. I looked back at the editing of that Smokey Yunick video, and some things made it past the editing section that I'm a little surprised by. Definitely some Motec exhaust system memes in there. But anyway, consider this a redemption, at least in some way, shape, or form, to try and straighten up a few loose ends. So, when he built a gem of a sneaky Nascar Chevelle in 1967. Now, this car is more myth than fact, no thanks to Smokey's slightly contradicting stories, but the car still exists, so here's what we do know. It was 2 inches lower than the normal car. It wasn't 7/8 scale, it wasn't 15/16 scale, it was pretty much the same car, just 2 inches lower. But the body was welded to a custom-built chassis, and the left side of the chassis was actually heavier than the right side for better grip on the ovals. The 416 cubic inch V8 was used as a stress member And everyone knows, of course, about the infamous 11-foot fuel line. Then there was the subject of aerodynamics. You see, in order to tackle the incredible high speeds of a superspeedway, i.e. Daytona, the car was stanced downwards for improved downforce. The floor was flush with the frame rails to create essentially a flat floor. The fenders were smooth, the bumper was shaped into an air dam, a dent was literally hammered into the roof to act as a vortex generator, and even the control arms were reshaped to reduce drag. Between 1966 and 1967, Smokey built 3 of these special Chevelles, but apart from some dirt racing done in 1966, none of them saw any significant NASCAR action because, there was some controversy between Unick and the NASCAR heads, to say the least, and they did not like his, usage of the gray zone that he was so famous for, and the Chevelle was the epitome of his rule-bending genius, and thus got the most attention, and it got 10 infractions plus 11 when he drove away without the fuel tank, because there was so much fuel in his lines. But there you go. We move on to the second gen, starting in 1967. It was a completely new styling to fit the new muscle car era, and just like before, it had a snot load of options ranging from 120 horsepower inline 6s, 396 V8s, and even a 50 horsepower steam prototype. They actually built a steam-powered version for some reason, I don't know, but they built one. The SS, though, remained pretty much the same. The engine sizes didn't change, despite the fact that engines were getting bigger. Why? Because of GM's silly rule about banning big blocks in mid-sized cars. Well, except the Corvette. But, as one scientist once put it, life, finds a way. And this is where Pittsburgh Chevrolet dealer Don Yanko comes into play. He's the guy who made the famous 427 Camaros, the Yanko Camaros. And he decided that the Chevelle deserves that treatment. He used the Copo system, or typically reserved for cop cars and taxis. And he ordered 99 Chevelles with the 427 cubic inch V8 making 425 horsepower. But the funny thing is, they didn't have the SS exterior package, so it looked like a normal Chevelle with some fancy Yanko stickers on it. But it didn't go like one, that's for damn sure. They are incredibly rare, incredibly expensive, they look phenomenal, and Barrett Jackson estimates that there are only 22 left in the world. They're awesome machines, and the Chevelle SS, especially the second gen, is already a phenomenal looking color, and I think these might look the best out of the bunch. But eventually, with Ford putting the 427 in the Mustang and Dodge Hemis running amok, GM finally ditched their silly big block rules in 1970 and allowed their companies to go wild. Oldsmobile put the 442 in the Cutlass, Pontiac put the 455 in the GTO, and Chevrolet put the 454 in the Chevelle. It was rated at 450 horsepower, but you could get an easy 500 horsepower to the wheels in 1970. The 0 to 60 was quoted 5 seconds flat and had a top speed of 142 miles an hour. And while sure you might think, it's a big American boat, it's actually full of incredibly high-tech stuff from the time, like aluminum manifolds, forged aluminum pistons, and even an active flap on the hood to shove air into the engine. And if that wasn't cool enough, it even came in the form of an awesome ute called the El Camino SS 454. It was an 8-body pickup truck that could do the quarter mile in 13.5 seconds and might very well be the best looking pickup / ute of all time. Sorry Australians, the Americans did beat you on this one. The SS-454 was the biggest and most popular of the big blocks, and might arguably be the high watermark for the muscle car era, with the styling cues, the sheer performance, the massive engine. It was everything the muscle car era was epitomized into one machine, especially because the muscle car era was not long for this world. The third gen quickly proved that in 1973, as prolonged workers' strikes and oil crises gripped the auto industry, the Chevelle suffered along with everybody else. I mean, the SS-454 made less than 300 horsepower, and by 1975 it was simply an appearance package. And even a very successful NASCAR career in the late 70s couldn't save it, and by 1977 the Chevelle was finally replaced with the Malibu. The Chevelle is an interesting one. It's often overlooked by the general public. Everyone knows what it is. Like, if you look at a muscle car, they'll say, oh yeah, that's a muscle car, or that's a Chevy, yeah. But when you say muscle car, you typically and incorrectly think of the Mustang, the Camaro, the Charger, or in case correctly, the Challenger. But the Chevelle, certainly the SS, often gets overlooked. And I don't know why. Maybe because the 454 came late in the game. It was one of the last great muscle cars. Either way, it's arguably the best looking, one of the fastest, and one of the best sounding ever made.